On today's episode, we talk a lot about affordability in the energy space. We're hearing a ton that costs are going up across the country after the passage of HR 1. Specifically, we zero in on the state of Massachusetts here, but we're excited to welcome Twiggy Mendenhall from CleanCapital to dig into some of this content with us.
Yeah, Twiggy did a great job of sort of articulating the message behind these conversations about energy affordability and what we have to offer as an industry, and taking some of the lessons we've learned from the federal level, applying them to these sort of state challenges and finding opportunities to move forward. And there's just they've got great stories to tell. I mean, their portfolio is wide ranging across the country, a lot of good community benefits. So I'm excited to share some of these specific stories and get a little bit more granular on the conversations that are happening in Massachusetts that are very live and are going to, it's just the beginning of a lot of these similar types of fights that we'll see across the states. Twiggy, thanks so much for joining us. If you wouldn't mind just starting with sort of an introduction about yourself and your career in the industry thus far, and maybe a little bit about CleanCapital, and then we'll jump in.
Absolutely. Yeah. My name is Twiggy Mendenhall. I am a senior policy associate at CleanCapital. Been with the company for almost 2 years now. We are a leading independent power producer that's focused on distributed clean energy. The company develops, builds, owns, and operates and invests in clean energy and companies. So we've been kind of leveraging over a decade of experience to do that. We've invested over $1 billion across the country to date. And we're really excited to keep doing the hard work toward energy dominance. We built a diverse portfolio of operating assets, and we continue to grow that pipeline.
Just before we dive into some of the content, I was curious: are you guys all over the U.S.?
We are all over the U.S. We're in over 23 states and Guam. In Massachusetts alone, we have over 68 megawatts of solar that we're owning and operating, and we have a bit of storage as well. So we are doing a little bit of everything everywhere.
Awesome.
Love it. You mentioned the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and that's sort of what we wanted to talk about a little bit in detail today. We typically think about things on a bigger sort of national scale, but there's just such an interesting sort of conversation, I think, happening around Massachusetts that can really lend itself to what I imagine will be similar sort of efforts and discussions in other states. So what we wanted to sort of get your read on is sort of the ongoing discussions around energy prices, energy affordability in Massachusetts, and the ways in which solar and storage can sort of contribute to lowering energy costs and sort of achieving some of those affordability goals. So why don't we start with just sort of from your vantage point, what are the factors that are leading to this conversation even coming up? What are are prices rising in Massachusetts? Where's that coming from? What are the sort of policymaker discussions that are happening right now?
For sure. I guess we're getting right into it.
Yeah.
First, remember, there's global inflation. So electricity rate and bill increases are in line with that economy wide from just a macro perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But for New England specifically, energy prices are high, and long-term, owner operators of projects that we do, distributed projects, are impacted by that. So here's what we kind of know. We know households are feeling the squeeze. So some are choosing between energy and essentials. The winter was tough, right? But it wasn't renewables driving those costs. The real culprit, I would say, was fossil fuel volatility. So natural gas and oil spiked, and our grid still leans very heavily into that.
Mm-hmm.
ISO New England recently reported that, even today, natural gas makes up, 51% of grid electricity in the region. So when you think about culprits, you think about that volatility, you think about increased natural disaster events, aging infrastructure, which leads to kind of rising grid costs. Just at a recent, New England conference of the Public Utility Commissioners, they kind of drove this home, right? Clean energy helps stabilize prices. The more solar and storage you have, the less dependence we have on expensive exports. And then especially when it's distributed, we can build that closer to where power is being used.
So Twiggy, we're interested in, zeroing in on what some of the common misconceptions might be in Massachusetts or around the country, in terms of what's really driving up energy costs. There's so many different narratives that are being tossed around, but really there's a whole bunch of different drivers. Wildfires in California. There's a lot of different examples we could give for what are actually responsible for driving those costs up. So we'd be curious what you think is the case in Massachusetts, and how you might share with our listeners what from your perspective some of those reasons are.
So one of the biggest misconceptions around energy prices is the role of renewable energy. We have aging infrastructure. We have to meet this really high demand that we're expecting over the next couple of years, decades, you name it. And the great thing about solar is that it's able to scale very easily. And one of the biggest reasons why I'm always so excited about the distributed energy industry is because of that scale, as well as the flexibility that we can bring. So, unlike some other forms of technologies, solar storage has the opportunity to ramp up like clockwork every morning, and battery storage ensures that power is there when you need it in the evening. So in terms of meeting reliability, not just about base load, but also about the flexibility that our technology provides.
I love that.
And I know that I think during a recent heat wave in New England, ISO New England, the grid operator sort of bore this out in data that they released that showed that the penetration of distributed solar and distributed energy writ large on the grid was one of the key factors in sort of keeping demand at a reasonable level so that blackouts didn't occur and we could sort of maintain grid reliability and prices didn't spike and all of that kind of stuff. So do you feel like that is understood by policymakers? Are they seeing that the fact that Massachusetts is a leader in solar deployment is one of the things that's sort of helping address these concerns?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, I said it earlier, people have misconceptions about solar's role in making their bills higher. But here's the kicker, solar's actually helping bring down costs, especially when it matters most. And we mentioned recent events in the region. Just look at what happened during the heat wave in June, right? ISO New England, that's the organization that operates our kind of regional electric grid, shared a chart that got a lot of attention. It showed that distributed solar, meaning smaller solar systems spread out across rooftops and communities, significantly reduced the demand on wholesale electricity markets. That's huge. Grid is maxed out and demand peaks. That's when power is most expensive and most polluting. So ISO New England uses the term behind the meter solar, or BTM. This refers to any solar that doesn't particularly, directly participate in that wholesale electricity market. And that's a lot of it. In fact, 89% of all solar in New England is considered behind the meter. That includes everything from rooftop solar to larger distribution connected projects that aren't trading power in the wholesale market, but are still generating electricity locally. So now here's where it gets interesting. Most people hear behind the meter and think only rooftop solar in someone's house. But when you dig into the data, you see that 70% of megawatts labeled as behind the meter are actually standalone systems, not physically behind someone's meter at home. So they're just classified that way because of how they interconnect to the grid and how the market tracks them. But regardless of where they sit, the result is all the same. These projects lower peak demand, reduce strain on the grid, and help avoid turning, some of the dirtiest, most expensive fossil fuel plants. And that saves everyone money.
I'm curious because we're going to be talking about this for years to come. Where does CleanCapital fit into this calculation? When you think about the affordability discussion, tell us a little bit about what CleanCapital brings to the table in terms of the solutions, not just on the business side, but for people. in terms of your business solutions?
For sure. When we take a step back and look at where CleanCapital fits into the energy affordability conversation, it's clear we play a critical role. We're not just financing projects, we are building and operating solar and storage assets that deliver real and reliable benefits. Some examples of that are, we're recently going to break ground on a project in Maryland that repurposes a brownfield into a bright field, right? We broke ground just last year on a project in New York, for example, that 40% of the project is going to be LMI. We have projects in Illinois, we have projects in Massachusetts SMART program that all are delivering these benefits in ways that are really meaningful. So we're continuing to engage in those programs, see how we can reduce costs, and work with all these folks that we're kind of in the middle of, right? Utilities, regulators, consumers, subscriber organizations, all these people were kind of playing the middleman and trying to work together to come to solid ground, because all of us want affordable energy. It's just how do we get there?
Bringing it back to sort of what's coming up in Massachusetts and sort of part of the reasons for these conversations. We know that there's sort of a piece of legislation being considered that would specifically address energy affordability. So would love to hear your perspective and your company's perspective on that proposed bill, and sort of what problems is it trying to address? What opportunities exist there to address these challenges around affordability, and in particular, knowing that with the passage of HR1 at the federal level, things have really changed pretty dramatically for how sort of project financing and project economics work from that sort of federal landscape. So in the vein of sort of states taking the lead, what sort of opportunities are there in Massachusetts to sort of work on these issues?
For sure. You mentioned HR1. So just taking a step back to address HR1 for a moment, we all know that key tax credits are scheduled to expire in 2027. We're going to have new foreign content regulations that are set to take effect when we need to rapidly expand capacity, right? So everyone is trying to figure out how to do that best. Everyone is trying to see which projects are most mature in their pipeline so that they can deploy. I think that's really important. And myself in particular, I'm really excited about what's next, right? Not just how we're going to navigate the rest of this ITC world, but what is in store for us post ITC, right? Like I said, CleanCapital has had a 10-year history. We've seen ebbs and flows. Yeah. We're going to keep investing in projects. We're going to keep pushing the industry forward. So we're just trying to figure out what that new landscape looks like as far as federal policy. And now talking about the bill in Massachusetts specifically, in May, Governor Haley announced H 4144. So that's an act relative to energy affordability, independence, and innovation. To me, that just signifies that the real battle has shifted away from Washington a bit. It's now happening at the state level, at the local level. And I think the industry did a really great job coming together for federal legislation, kind of rallying together to get behind a unified communication strategy around why our industry is really, really important. I think we need that same strategy within our local committees, our local trade organizations, to just have one strategic message that helps explain why the projects that we do are so critically important to not just, getting capacity online, but the benefits we bring to the people that we serve. We like to think of electrons as just electrons on the grid, but I'm consuming those. My mother is, your cousins are, your family is, your neighbors are, your colleagues are. So kind of humanizing that, not just thinking about it as energy, but what are we doing with that energy? We are reducing operational costs for the businesses that we buy from. We are powering schools. We are powering hospitals. We are doing all these things that are really important. One proposed provision in that Massachusetts bill is the flexibility interconnection program. I think that has great potential to make clean energy deployment easier, faster, more affordable. And I think it would help streamline the process and reduce costs while still ensuring that the grid stays reliable. We need easier ways to get projects in the ground, and flexible interconnection is a way to do that, especially if we can work through some of the barriers. As far as other provisions, I think that the bill presents an opportunity to get all stakeholders in the same room and on the same page. Like I said, we need to come together in a unified way to figure out how not to hinder development, but push it forward in a meaningful way so that we can keep costs low and meet demand.
Yeah, well, you really nailed it there with sort of taking the lessons that we learned from our recent federal advocacy and applying a lot of those messages and strategies to the local and state level. Because, in my view, the policy, it doesn't really matter what it is that we're going and asking, regulators or legislators to do. The message is the same. The message is, the benefits that these technologies and these projects provide to local communities, the ability for solar and storage to bring down costs, increase reliability, build a more secure and abundant grid. And I think you're absolutely right that we need to sort of rally around those same messages at the state level to create some opportunities to, make it easier to build, make it more streamlined, so that we can, just continue to grow the opportunities for those local communities. So, I think that's a good sort of, re-energizing moment, right? We've sort of seen what's happened at the federal level. Folks are a little bit frustrated with the outcome of that legislation, obviously, but there's still so much opportunity in the states and in other avenues to make good things happen and to keep building. So looking forward to seeing what happens in the Commonwealth for sure.
You and me both. I mean, as the state moves forward with these conversations, I know we're ready to play a part in kind of debunking myths, as you mentioned earlier, and kind of making the case, setting the record straight.
It's important for us to articulate as part of that narrative what some of the solutions are on the state level, right? So when we're talking to the governors and their staff about what, the true solutions look like, they need to be thinking about not just what the financial and tax incentives are on the state level and how some of the state policies can solve for some of the outcomes in HR1, but what are the soft costs that go into projects? How should they be expediting processes, to your point about flexible transmission and interconnection? Those are really obvious places to look in terms of building a better system on the ground to reduce costs for taxpayers and ratepayers. So we've got a long road ahead in Massachusetts and in other states to make sure that folks are educated and they understand what these challenges are. And it's not just what the challenge is, but how do we actually solve for it, right? Yeah. And what solutions can CleanCapital bring to the table to make that process easier and more affordable for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, also, it's just about diversification too. I think we really need to start embracing innovation a little bit more. And, in addition to the economic benefits of something like community solar, diversifying our energy sources through different types of programs is really meaningful, giving folks the opportunity to finance projects in ways that works for them. It's not always just community solar or just net metering or just these things. We use a lot of different mechanisms to build, develop, finance these front of the meter distribution connected projects. So options is really important too, because stakeholders are different, use cases are different. And we just need a little bit more innovation to kind of meet those needs of different people, from low to moderate income folks to businesses to hospitals, et cetera.
Yeah, and to your point earlier, that's such a perfect role for solar and storage to play, because it is such a modular and sort of scalable and adaptable resource. And I think the more that we can not look at the grid as like a giant monolithic, one source of supply, one source of demand, which it obviously is not. Our colleague Kevin likes to talk about the grid as sort of like an investment portfolio. Like, you wouldn't want all your assets in one fund. You wouldn't want your electricity all coming from one source, and sort of pairing up need and demand with the right kinds of projects and technologies that are going to meet that need is, seems like common sense. But, I think just continuing to demonstrate that we can get there, and we can do that with sort of smart policies that enable this growth.
Yeah, I think big picture, when we talk about energy affordability, when we talk about resilience and, the independence, we're not just talking in theory anymore. We're taking action. We're a real industry. At CleanCapital, we're actively, building the energy system of the future. And our latest move is proof of that. Just recently we acquired a 27 megawatt portfolio of distributed solar and 25 megawatt hours of battery storage across Massachusetts and California. These aren't speculative projects. They are real operating assets that are already delivering clean energy, reliable power to local schools, municipalities, and businesses. This portfolio includes, cutting edge battery storage systems that are really essential to grid stability, especially in those high demand periods like heat waves that we talked about. It's not just about the environment. These assets are delivering energy through smart state programs like Massachusetts Smart and long-term agreements with the community, with commercial partners. So that means, again, predictable pricing. It means local jobs, more control for communities over the energy future. And it matters because U.S. electricity demand is expected to rise significantly by 2030, driven by everything from EV adoption to AI-powered data centers. So if we don't build smarter, we're going to pay more later in dollars and reliability. So we're investing in distributed generation and storage today. We're helping bring more megawatts on the ground. We're reducing costs. And so the next time you hear someone ask, why is my electricity bill so high? Let's make sure they also hear about the role of solar and storage in keeping those bills from being even higher. We're proud to be doing our part, and there's a lot more to come.
Excellent.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah. If somebody wants to learn more about CleanCapital, what should they do?
Yeah. If you want to learn more about CleanCapital, please visit cleancapital.com. We have ways for you to reach out to different team members based on your need. Feel free to reach out to me. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, get my contact information, and we can have really great conversations about how to put states forward like Massachusetts and those across the country.